key role on Hellraiser as both a New World executive and editor, Tony Randel would step into the shoes of Clive Barker and take over the reins of the much-anticipated sequel, Hellbound.
In the same way that they'd made the novella Hellbound Heart in a kind of simultaneous period with Hellraiser, I think they were already talking about what would become Nightbreed, and which Clive wrote as the short novel Cabal. And I think they were intending that Clive would go on to write and direct what became Nightbreed at that point, so they needed other hands to do Hellbound.
Clive told me that he had to deliver these books, and it was great because that was more publicity for Clive, more publicity for the film. We had a good script with Pete. We asked Tony Randel to come on board to direct it because we knew he wanted to be a director.
Michael McDowell had been slated to both write and direct the sequel, and then sadly personal reasons meant that he couldn't do the job. Which very sorry about that, but obviously it was a blessing for both Tony Randel, whose first directorial gig it was, and for me, whose first screenwriting job it was.
I met with Michael in my office in Century City, and we talked about it, and he was going to do the film. And then shortly thereafter, I believe his partner contracted AIDS, and he might have been diagnosed with AIDS himself, and he bowed out. And that's when there was an open director's slot, and I said, I think I want to do this.
It was still obviously Doug Bradley standing there as Pinhead. It still had all the aspects of it. But we were sitting there beavering away in the background, me and Clive, to make sure that it was still the same world, the same place, the same. Got involved heavily with the look of hell and the whole look of the lament configuration, sort of travelling in hell.
A lot of those people on that set on the first day of Hellraiser II had been on Hellraiser I and had been used to working with Clive, so there was quite a nervous bit of tension on the set the first afternoon, the first couple of days, first week.
For the first couple of weeks, I was really learning how to direct, and I was given great assistance by Robin Vidgen, who came on to shoot the second one, and Andy Armstrong, who was my first AD.
I can only assume it must have been pretty difficult for Tony stepping into Clive's shoes, and I think anybody who comes to the helm of a sequel of a very successful and popular first movie, it must be difficult. And it was his first movie too, I'm pretty certain I'm right in saying, as a director.
Incredibly efficient, incredibly absorbed, completely obsessed with all the technical aspects, and really a man in his world. I remember him being quite quiet and diffident and kind of totally focused on delivering this picture.
He was extremely nervous. And if you walk onto a set, if you know the hierarchy, obviously the director is the top person on the set, so to speak, but you have, in films, you have a first assistant and a second assistant director, sometimes a third assistant director. And the first assistant director's job is to be the bastard that the director can't be.
We basically followed the same formula and had the same team supporting him, but he was very much more experienced than Clive was because he'd been an exec.
I remember, for some reason, we started shooting after lunch, and at 2 o'clock, they might correct me in a minute, but I do remember that he wasn't on set, and after about 15 minutes, I got off and I walked away quiet. I didn't say it. I was going to the AD, I was going off, because that was his job to try and find out where he was. And I went down to his office, and he was sitting in there, and he couldn't get out of the chair. He was so nervous. And I said, we're all here to help, come on, come and do it. And he came on set, and within 2 or 3 days, he kind of got onto his stride. Of course, he'd rehearsed with the actors, so they weren't strange to him. But to actually come on a set with like 10 or 11 electricians and 40, 50 people on that set, however many there were, it's quite daunting if you've never done it before. Because if you've never done it, you know that everyone's watching you to make a mistake. But I said, we're not that. We're there to help you do this, you know about cutting, so let's get on with it. And he did.
Having left the dog company in 1980, Peter Atkins still remained close friends with Barker, and he himself would soon become an integral part of the Hellraiser legacy.
Pete Atkins, who was another friend back from dog company days, part of the Scouse Mafia on Hellraiser, was writing the screenplay to Clive's storyline.
My involvement with the Hellraiser series began because they needed a sequel. And well, I should rewind. I'd turned 30, and at that point I realized I wasn't going to be a pop star. Because, you know, if you're already a pop star when you're 30, you can stay one, but very few people become one. And so I had started writing, I'd written a few short stories, I think sold one. Or I'd certainly started sending them out, but maybe got rejected, I can't remember. Anyway, Clive had read them and was very kind about them.
Pete did it in conjunction with Clive over his shoulder and did a great job. I mean, you know, he took it, he expanded it, made it bigger, took it into the Leviathan and all sorts of places, and the imagery in it is, I think, wonderful. I
think Clive was smart enough to tell me to lie. He said, if Chris asks you if you've written screenplays, say that you have. But the thing is, I've told that story before, and I always make it sound like, and we fooled Chris, that I knew how to write a screenplay. But the truth is, of course, you know, any idiot can learn how to lay out a screenplay. You know, the secret of screenwriting is not learning where to indent the dialogue and the character names. It's learning to write in pictures, to know that your ultimate audience is going to see and hear your work, not read it. So it
was an operatic horror film.
I loved Pete's script from the get-go. I mean, it takes Hellraiser and it ramps it up, basically, and it follows Hellraiser very closely. I mean, the action starts literally almost minutes after the first one has finished.
It's a bit about obsessive love, but it's also about obsession with the occult and learning, is there more? Is there more? That's kind of the theme of the film. Is there a world beyond this? I need to know. I first met Pete at my hotel. It was called the Meridian on Piccadilly Circus. And because I'd come over to develop the script. And Pete was expecting to meet a guy in a suit and tie, because I was an executive, or now a former executive at New World. And I was expecting to meet some crazed, tattooed, punked out maniac. And when we first met, we kind of looked at each other and said, you look pretty normal.
Tony and I have been very close friends now for whatever it is since then, like 30 years. But at the time, I thought, New World executive, some cunt in a suit, what the hell? And I was expecting the worst, because I didn't know what executives meant. But I was certainly expecting some power broker in a three-piece suit, some smart ass.
Most of the time I'm in shorts or sweats and sweatshirts. I'm really casual. And we just got immediately clicked, and Pete's been one of my best friends for years. In fact, my son's middle name is Peter, named after Pete. So we're very close.
And we worked on the script for the next, I think, 2 or 3 weeks. Tony brought a lot of ideas, not just visual. You know, he's a guy with a good narrative sense and a good thematic sense. So we had a great time, like jamming verbally in the room, and then we were in different hotels, and we'd talk, and I'd go away and write stuff up, and we'd talk some more, and eventually what was essentially the movie that was shot really gelled in the 3rd and 4th draft.
After already giving Hellraiser a harsh critical review on his BBC television show Film 87, popular British critic Barry Norman would take on a Cenobite too many with his scathing reviews of the horror genre.
according to some admiring sources, has gleefully broken the rules of the genre and or produced a genuine original. I read these comments with total bemusement because, as far as I'm concerned, Hellraiser is a nasty little film that I watched with a deep, and if not original, then certainly genuine loathing.
Now, I'd remembered all the slurs for 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years where he had just absolutely hated horror films, and just every time they came up on film 80, 81, 82, 80, whatever, he had just trashed them all. And I went, all right. I said, you can do it. You can come down. I'll set it up for you so you can bring your crew down. You can do your filming, whatever. But I'm going to deal with you. You're going to have your photo taken with Pinhead and Clive Barker. And he said, I don't. I said, yes, that's the deal. You want to come and film? We're going to do it.
I always used to watch him, and I thought he was quite a constructive, not destructive, critic. And I think that's what all critics should be. If they don't like something, be constructive about it. Don't destroy it, because there's good in everything. Obviously, Hellraiser is not it's not everyone's cup of tea, so I expected that. He didn't mention the photography, he didn't mention the acting, he just didn't like the film.
We were all sitting behind the scenes with blood guns, just so desperate to try and get something on his trousers or something just to get him back, but we didn't.
I came out of my dressing room in full makeup and costume and startled Barry Norman, who was making his way down the corridor with a raincoat over his arm. And he was very startled and looked very uneasy. And I said, "Oh, hello." And he said, hello, I'm looking for, and I said, yeah, over there, down there. And off he went.
Someone said, oh, Barry Norman's come on here. I said, let me get at him. But we didn't, we were too busy. And of course, these celebrities, I'm Barry Norman, I'm here, I'm the film critic, I'm television. Go away.
When he arrived, Clive and Chris put him in the locked room and gave him the grilling over the review that he gave Hellraiser, and said, Clive particularly, I think his thing was, why are you doing this? Why are you attacking, although American funded, a British movie? Why? And Barry Norman apparently admitted that it was because he didn't like horror movies. It had nothing to do with Hellraiser. And of course that gave Clive plenty of ammunition to come back and say, but it's not your job, to judge a comedy on the basis of whether you like comedies or not, or whether you like war films or not, or westerns. It's irrelevant, The Searchers is a great western. It's a great film. There have been a lot of very bad westerns. There have been a lot of great horror movies. There have been a lot of truly appalling horror movies. Treat them on their own merits. And he kind of rather bashfully said, yes, you're quite right, I was wrong. And I don't think we had a bad review from him thereafter.
He got on side in the end.
Fast becoming a pop culture icon alongside Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers and Leatherface, fans were keen to see and know more about the lead Cenobite, now affectionately called
Hellraiser was, it's certainly an unusual film. There's nothing else like it.
Ken was just great. I mean, I'm never sure whether he hated it or loved it, but he was a great performance. And I think he could act his socks off and overact his socks off, and I think he enjoyed it.
I know that there was a group of 3 of us were up for Shenard. One of the other ones was an actor called Francis Matthews, who was a bit like Gerald Harper. He was one of those rather sort of elegant men who played sort of... Gerald Harper played a thing on television where they play urbane, sort of sophisticated men who got involved in crime and whatever. And Francis Matthews was one of those. And but anyway, the part came to me.
Ken is big. He's loud and big. He's fabulous. When we found out it was Ken Cranham, I don't think there was anybody else involved in the part. It's lovely, because I'd seen him in Shine On Harvey Moon, that he was in. That was of that generation, so to speak. And he's a brilliant actor with a brilliant voice.
At the time, I'd been offered King John at Stratford-on-Avon by Shakespeare, and it took me quite a long time to read the play. I didn't know the play, and I had to choose between that and Hellraiser II. At the time, I used to see quite a bit of Gary Oldman, and I could tell that he was rather envious of me being offered Hellraiser II. It's obviously something he wanted to do, was a horror film, and I'm sure that the end product of that was him playing Dracula in that film, American film he did. It was something he had a yearning to do. And there was a pair of antique curtains, and this antique curtain shop would let you take one curtain home. And it occurred to me, if I did Hellraiser II, I could get these curtains. Whereas if I'd gone to Stratford-on-Avon, there was just not enough money involved.
Very, very focused actor. Big track record, came to us with a workload as big as your arm, you know, and he's still working hard now. Very professional man, and great. Always good morning. I mean, he became one of the boys, you know, and liked to joke. But when that camera started to roll in rehearsals, he was absolutely 100% there. Great guy to work with.
I've known Ken for years, so I mean, you know, we were good friends, and we just had a ball. We just had great fun. We didn't go into any deep psychological depth about, you know, our characters. But no, we had a laugh. We just had a huge amount of fun, really.
I think that Gennard is a very central figure to Hellraiser II, isn't he? I mean, his whole arc is contained in that film, from his creation to his death. I mean, I think he occupies actually the centre of that film, if anyone does.
I thought the scenes with him and Clare Higgins were pretty sexy, actually, and even though she uses him for her own reasons, he is the one bit you remember from that film.
Tiffany is a girl in her early teens, but looks younger than her years due to her boyish figure and her slightly overdelicate features.
For me, it was important to have this a character who had this ability to solve.
After the departure of Grace Kirby, Canadian mime artist Barbie Wilde would take on the role of the female Cenobite, whilst not only successfully filling the shoes of Kirby, but creating her own version of the iconic Cenobite.
I think Grace found it physically very painful because that costume was very restrictive and she had back problems. I understand. I've never spoken to her. I've literally never spoken to her since. The line I heard was she swore she'd never set foot south of Hadrian's Wall because she lives up in Scotland.
I think I got the audition because I knew what a Cenobite was. And I said, oh, it's a member of a religious order. And he went, oh, no, I think it's a word Clive made up. I said, no, Tony, it's actually, I looked it up in the dictionary. Never contradict your director. And it's a member of an order, mostly a religious order. And he said, no, it's not. And then his assistant ran to get a dictionary and said, Barbie's right. And so I got the job probably out of revenge. She contradicted me. I'll give her the job so she can stuff her under the makeup.
What's not to like about Barbie Wilde? She's just a little bundle of joy. She can talk for England, which is amazing. She's from Canada, I believe. But no, she's great fun. Really easy to get along with.
This woman came in with this American accent, and we're thinking, you know, this isn't Grace. This isn't sort of like a formal Cenobite type person. And she was a laugh, and she got on with it and did the job.
She kind of became part of the Cenobite team straight away. Stepping into Grace's shoes, and the four of us just got on really well. She and Nick and Simon and I, sitting around for hours waiting to be called to set, arriving at 4 o'clock in the morning and getting on set at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, day after day after day. Yeah, Was all good.
Mark Coulier came in and took over doing the female Cenobite and resculpted it to fit Barbie, because Barbie's got a slightly shorter neck than I think Grace Kirby had, so it just changed very slightly.
The only difficulty with Barbie was she's just never stops, you know, she's tap dancing, you know, she'd stick her makeup on. And you've got all these edges, and our terror as prosthetic makeup artists is you stick a makeup on it looks fantastic when it walks out of the makeup, when the actor walks out of the makeup room, and then you just watch it fall apart during the day as they bite into a bacon sandwich and scratching something. You know, they only have to scratch the cheek and tear the piece, and you've got to redo the makeup, you know.
It's funny when you're sitting in the makeup room and having all this gore put on you, and the special KY jelly, which is the ooze, the nice and shiny ooze. You're not really thinking about, oh my God, I'm being covered in blood. It's just makeup.
Barbie's got very, you know, round features and full cheeks, and so you couldn't really create that skeletal quality that Grace Kirby had on the first one.
It was obviously quite different than Grace's in the first one. I didn't have the creepy bits of hair, and my facial configuration was quite different than hers. So they also did different throat jewelry for me, and I thought hers was much more interesting. But she pouted. But so it was just that process of doing all the makeup tests and then getting on set.
Oh, by the way, here's a little razor. I just want you to have this a minute. So, yeah, but Ken's brilliant. He knows what he's doing.
He was wearing a complete chest piece that went all over his chest, right over his shoulder, just over his shoulder blades of sort of boils and bits and pieces, and some bits and pieces on his face. And so he blunted a razor, really, really took it to town and rounded it and blunted it and said, look, just be careful. And it had a little blood tube in, so he could go like that and blood would squirt out.
He was so ferocious in his acting that he ended up marking his body all over underneath the prosthetic makeup.
The discussion as by Mr. Browning, the nutcase padded cell, kind of spoke for itself. It was just explained that really getting you out of that cell and onto that mattress, the spilling of the blood, repeat of what happened in the first film. When the blood is spilt, reborn out of the mattress comes, on this occasion, the reborn Julia, yeah.
It's an extremely gory scene.
Tony said he wanted me to score it sympathetically, as I recall. I may have this wrong. And I turned to Tony and said, no, Tony, no, we can't. You know, yeah, we feel that this is kind of weird and all that, and sad. We feel sad for the guy. But I can't, you know, this is gross. I need to enhance this moment with some twisted something or other there. I don't think we can write emotion because this scene is over the top.
We're over his shoulder and he is slashing himself with a Stanley knife. And because you couldn't see what he was doing, that really affected me. I think I put the clapperboard on and then stood there watching him do all this slashing. And then my head became very heavy and I felt ill. And I nodded to the focus puller, Danny, and I had to leave the set before I fainted.
They intercut a close-up of my forearm with all these bugs. Or I think that was all to do with in the mind of the man. This bloke thinks he's got these all over his arm, hence, oh, a razor. Now I can really, yeah. That was a thinking about it.
No, it was horrible, that sequence, and as I said, they purposely overshot it. It just went on and on and on. These skinned rabbits writhing around, covered in bits and blood and things. It was a very long sequence, that.
When Julia is reborn out of the mattress and her arms fly up and blood shoots out, there's a shot of Ken Cranham getting blood across his face. Well, I was sitting right underneath the lens with a squirt gun, and I went whoosh and hit him the first time. First take, perfect. I love that. In fact, I like shooting Ken, but that's another story.
Out come the hands like that and clamped, remember, they clamped over my mouth. And, well, it is what it is. It just happened. So that happened like I didn't know what was going to, well, I knew what was going to happen, but didn't know when. So that was all nice surprise, all sort of, oh gosh, yeah, instant occurrence.
It's quite horrifying to shoot, to be there on the set, because it's believable, you know? And it's not like today, you put them in front of a green screen and they've got to act to nothing. Here, they're acting against each other and they're reacting to what each of them is seeing.
A very nice thing happened to me the day after filming at Pinewood, doing Mr. Browning on that mattress all day long. Long day for everybody. It was tough. I got back to my dressing room, and there on my dressing room table was a bottle of whiskey with a little label, and it said, "Sorry, it's been such a long, hard day. With love from the production of this Hellraiser II." It's my little gift for being a good boy. Sweet, isn't it? Very much like the role of Frank in Hellraiser, the effects crew required a thin actor to play the role of skinless Julia instead of Claire.
Solved that because we knew where to put the seams, we knew how to do it, and she is a piece of art.
I can vividly picture the drawing. The drawing was just a little sketch. A lot of things just happened on bits of paper in those days. A sketch, and once I'd drawn it, it was like, and I tell you, the influence, although it might look like it's not there at all in the slightest, was Geiger's drawings of beautiful women like robots and stuff like that. So I was like, okay, I want to do my skinned woman as I still want the beauty. I want you to find her strangely attractive.
Little John sculpting the face. I believe that he made the lips slightly fuller, just so that they were a bit sexier, and I think the cheekbones were a bit higher. For me, I certainly emphasised the cheeks of her bottom.
She's got, for me, perfect, brilliant, really, what a trooper, because that's a gruelling makeup, isn't it? Do you remember Jim Carrey? He once did The Grinch, and he had to get marine medical people help him, talk him through the trauma of doing, trauma experts getting him through the process of putting the Grinch makeup on, and prosthetic makeup like Julia's complete body makeup was completely traumatic. And Deborah was just, she was beautiful, charming. We had such a laugh, such a tight little group of people working on her, and it ended up more or less just me, Bev, and Deborah working together.
She was amazing. She was so patient and so professional, and she just kept very still. She just used to go into a meditation. She didn't move. She was fabulous. Couldn't have worked with anyone dearer.
She wouldn't like me for this, but I think booked her as from a casting agent. We wanted someone really dead skinny, so that we could make it look like there was nothing of her. And she was a little bit bigger in her when we met her than she was on her casting card. But it was fantastic. I was never so delighted as I was with that makeup.
We both went through the same nightmare hell on that day. Pleasant nightmare hell of long days filming, and she was the sweetest pie, and said how we both gave each other a kiss and never seen her since.
There's something about Skin Julia I just really enjoyed working and seeing her come, so that when she was on set, she was for that brief time that she was naked, I thought, oh, that's exactly what I wanted to do. I had some great help from Beverly Pond-Jones. She helped me a lot on the second one, because she was a very expert makeup artist. And the makeup that we're doing on Julia, she used to do a lot of help with me around the eyes and stuff like that.
Little John was, he was my backbone. He was sculpting a backbone, he was mine. He taught me, he guided me through. It was lovely.
The first kiss I had with the skinless Julia, she wasn't being played by Clare Higgins, she was played by a very skinny South African actress who was wearing a sort of body outfit, and it looked like those medical books before the National Health people would have at home, a big medical encyclopedia, and in the middle of it you'd have layer by layer, you would look into the human body, and it actually looked like that. You could see all the sort of tubes and bits and pieces. And he wanted us to kiss, and Tony said, "I want to see tongues." And on the day, the South African actress had flu, and I thought, I'm sorry, you're not going to see tongues.
We made a bandage suit. Again, we thought we were going to for her to slip on. And the reason for making the bandaged prosthetic head piece was for continuity, really, because it would be very difficult for 3 days to get those bandages in the right place. We thought it would be easier to make a mask and then just slip it on. And so that's what we did. But in fact, with Julia, with Claire, we actually used real bandages for her, and then it was really difficult for me to match real bandages with a prosthetic piece of sculpture. She had a dress on as well, I think, and he lifted it, and then she had the bandages under the dress. And it was just all about keeping it clean, even when Ken was it was Ken that was bandaging her. And, you know, there was a way to do it so that the continuity matched the way I'd bandaged her for the rest of the film. And I remember, you don't do it like that, you've got to do it like this. And he's like, darling, I've got fucking lines to learn. I can't fucking do, you know, get...
I do sit there every time and think, that is my hand. So I remember that basically they were doing inserts and they just wanted, and I was up seeing the guys stroking up the backside of Julia. It's actually my hand in that one very brief shot. So you get to see part of me out of makeup and costume.
Little John up her skirt. Oh no, he had the dress on and everything, didn't he? Hysterical. I think he liked dressing in ladies' clothes.
In one, we see the Chatterer in some hell's equivalent of a beauty salon. He's being remade. This involves the scar tissue being manually peeled from the upper part of his face to reveal beneath small, vicious human eyes.
I designed Chatterer II for the second movie, which was really came around because Nick couldn't see, hear or speak in the first movie. And the fact that in the second movie they were going to be revealed to be to once all been human, I thought that was possibly a way to make it a little more human and to give Nick eyes. So that's what we did. Chatterer II was basically for that. I have a memory in my mind of seeing the rushes of it, and basically there were, in fact, for a long time I had the two flaps of skin that they had over, so there were two teardrop pieces of skin over my eyes when I was wearing the Chatterer II makeup. And then there were they were a bit like back scratchers that pulled the pieces apart. And that's what I remember of the sequence. We must have filmed it. As I say, I'm pretty certain I saw rushes of it. There's a scene that no one's ever seen in Hellbound, which is a transformation sequence from Chatterer 1 to Chatterer 2, which isn't there anymore, probably because I fucked it up, basically. It wasn't as good as it should have been, probably. I don't know. I think we shot it. I can't honestly remember. But you'll notice in Hellbound he changes from the original Chatterer into the slightly more human-looking Chatterer without any real reason. And as I say, there was a sequence. I think we shot it.
What Cliff had done was to produce a small set of pieces that went over the new Chatterer mask, and that you would see a sequence where the eyelids were unfurled and peeled back so he could see. I don't think it was ever shot.
It took place in a little cell. I think there was at one stage going to be a character who was a box maker. I might be wrong. And All I can remember about it is that I constructed some sort of helmet device which was made out of all the foil bits of the box, all the box etchings, and it was kind of constructed over that, and it came down over his head, and it was smoking, and then something went out and grabbed his teeth and pulled them out, and something came in and grabbed hold of those sort of eye slit things and unraveled those to reveal his eyes. That's about all I can remember. It probably wasn't very good. It probably wasn't as good as it was in my head.
Hellbound not.
And then they took it off, and I had to act backwards. I had to act somebody that was happening to. It's hard to even explain it, but they didn't understand how well I'd done it until they reversed it, and it actually worked. It's a strange thing because your imagination can be very sort of alive in those situations. It's a bit like playing an extraordinary game as a child, only you're grown up and doing these things.
After already creating such visually stunning creations such as the original Cenobites, makeup artist Jeff Portas would be tasked with creating the look of the new Cenobite Channard.
So I had somebody lined up to do Channard, and they got Ken Cranham for the job. And the person I'd had lined up for it then said, well, yes, but I'd want a separate credit. I'd want a credit on the front reel, or at least saying Channard makeup by so-and-so, and said, I can't promise that. And so he pulled out of it. And so I thought, look, it can't be that bad, I'll do it. And I went to speak to Chris and the other people in the production. I said, look, don't worry, there's only one scene that involves Pinhead and Channard together. And it'll be a couple of days, and I'll make sure that we split it between 2 days that are separated. So I thought, okay, I'll go for it.
So he incorporated a couple of just little sort of elements to it, like there's a sort of a Robocop homage, bullet hole in the forehead, because that was out at the time, I think, Robocop, and we were all nuts for it in the workshop. And also there's like a bit of Freddy burn on there as well. So as he's sculpting it, he kind of, showed it around to people in the workshop, and just to get everyone's approval.
So I thought, if I do it with wires, that means I've got to stick these damn things on every day. So I didn't want to do a multi-piece because I'd have the tracks for the wires going in the same place each day. So I did it as a pullover mask with a separate piece at the back that held the thing on and just tightened it up. So I'd have some kind of pull, so in case it was loose. His mouth was free down from out there down to about there, and the rest was all stuck on the top of him. I designed him, did the wires, did all the bits and pieces, painted him blue. There's a shot in the scene where you see the blood being sucked out and blue being pumped in. And all these bits and pieces, we designed the whole sequence.
I have to say that the woman who designed the costumes was a sort of arty person on the sort of fringes of things that I knew from elsewhere. And that the sort of basic harness of the costume was very uncomfortable. It wasn't a comfortable outfit to wear at all. I mean, and the days I was the monster, I would often sort of fortify myself with some cold Chardonnay, just to sort of take the curse off this sort of rather crushing costume, because very often all you had to do was something like that. No lines to remember.
The Ken character, because it was a different character, and he was a completely different body shape to anyone who'd been on before. But the best bit was he really didn't know what to expect. And when I turned up one morning with his costume, and I got it out of its big hanging thing, and he said, "Oh my God, Elvis the last week." And he loved it.
I can remember one day when I was in my full Dr. Channard outfit, and I couldn't find my way out of the studio, and I went out of a side door, and there was a car full of people and a dog, and they saw me, and the dog went, "Oh, oh, oh, oh," and it felt horrible. They didn't used to let me go to the the canteen at lunchtime. It just put people off their food. I used to have to sit in my room and food would be delivered. It was always lukewarm by the time it got to me.
We wanted to keep it relatively simple. And I did a little bit where I had one ear, took his earlobe off, the other one went down into his ear, things like that, little bits and pieces. But we wanted to keep it simple but relatively elegant and in the same ethos as the rest of the Cenobites.
He was in the makeup chair for 6 hours, then God knows how long it took to get in the costume, at least an hour, because it was much more complicated than mine. And then after 3 hours wait, the second assistant came in and said, listen, Ken, I'm so sorry, but we're not going to get to you today. And he went, oh my God, please, anything, just use me, just take a shot at me, please. I said, no, sorry, Ken, we won't get to you. He said, I'll wait around for another couple of hours, just use me in this makeup, And I said, no. And he just looked at me. And I think that's when they took that photograph of the two. There's a photograph of the two of us just looking at the camera, and his face, his eyes look so sad. Because it's a long, tiring process, and when you go through that, you just want to be used.
But the actual organisation, particularly of tubes coming out of your head covered in herpes and that lot, was actually very risky.
The sexually questionable appendage arising out of the top of his head.
The thing on his head, it's like a big sucker with one of those brain implements whizzing around, isn't it?
I remember going on set when Chanard had the dirty great big penis stuck onto the top of his head, and he's going.
A penis?
This was, again, something that was well underway by the time I got there. And it was kind of like, there's a giant penis attached to his head.
And on the top of the big asparagus coming out of my head was designs that were copied directly from herpes. And to give them a sort of sore look, they would have these economy-sized tubes of KY jelly and splatter this stuff all over you, continually sort of hanging off you. And my theory is that, when you're in a roadside cafe and they give you a nastily fried egg, and it's got that terrible transparent bit on the top, and it wriggles around, that really part of the horror effect of the films is creating that feeling in you as the audience.
It was meant to look like a penis. What do you want? This is meant to be sex, isn't it? This is meant to be sort of like, when I can't remember the guy who sculpted it. I can't remember his name. And I just said, let's make it look like a big cock. With a drill that comes out of the head and grabs onto somebody's head and hangs him around. Well, we did the veins, we did the pus, we did all the stuff.
Although I thought that was an interesting idea, I didn't quite get the idea. I understand why it was done, but it did feel a little bit strange at the time. That this enormous phallic symbol, with no real denying that it is what it is.
When Nick calls it the syphilitic penis, I suppose if you think of the Leviathan, once it's been stretched out like that, is a kind of vagina. So you are going back to kind of sexual imagery, and it's all the way through Hellraiser on with the flower exploding with blood coming out of the screen. It's all sexual imagery. It's clever old stuff, isn't it? Once you look at it, it's no wonder people have studied this stuff at university.
Well, when you see it being sculpted, and there's a few in there, it looks like a giant penis.
Even on the model of Ken Cranham that's being held by it looks like a large cock, So what are you going to do? That was what it was. We did the veins, we did the lot. And it has a sort of a thing that pulls, but not quite a foreskin, but it sort of opens up, the drill comes out.
I just thought, I saw one of those implements at the beginning of the film when he was doing his brain surgery. No, they didn't say anything about penis jokes to me. No.
A 15-foot-long mechanical penis.
I was rather alarmed to read that the stuntman has been claiming that he played the part, because he didn't. I mean, he might have done a couple of shots, and you can't tell which ones they are. I mean, I think they changed the script to accommodate the fact that they'd injured me, because this roll of lino that came out of the top of my head, covered in herpes, and this flying harness. Now, anyone who flies in a harness, whether they're in Peter Pan or whatever, will tell you that it's quite a nasty experience because it really grips you, squeezes your balls. And so you got that, and then you got this, it had the texture of linoleum, this tube, and they injured me quite badly. And so I think they changed from then on, the flying sequences.
Horror movies to use beautiful old school technique, not that they were old school at the time, but two of the greatest things about Hellbound, speaking as a card-carrying nerd, for me, are the fact that we have the glass paintings of the great legendary Cliff Colley in the movie, and also the stop motion work of Rory Fellows, fantastic.
The big issue for Hellbound, we were doing it in stop motion, but this was a live action film and we had to make it as accurate as we could. And we needed to find a technique to make the animation convincing and not distracting.
We brought on Rory and Carl to do stop motion animation, and that included my creating a box called Leviathan, which is a different thing entirely to the first box, and working on the mechanisms to allow stop motion to happen on that and how to interact it with the original box as well. So there was some extra design work for me to do that.
The thing about the animation team was that we were quite separate in a way. We had our little gig to do and they had their gig to do, which was all the kind of model making. So it was, I suppose what I mean by that is that it was actually quite easy to integrate. It was a bit like trying to integrate at a new school. I knew one of the other new boys, Carl, and we were able to kind of hover about in our own dark corner and slowly get to know people as we needed to get to know them.
We made big sections of, like giant oversized versions of Lament configuration. Rory Fellows is an astonishingly good animator. He's now moved to the digital side, but he's one of the last great stop motion animators as well. We were at the end of the stop motion era by the time we did Nightbreed, but we were pushing it even with stuff we were doing then on Hellraiser.
Carl invented or came up with the idea of triple exposing every frame so that we could get that kind of smoothness of movement. And that's how we went forward. So the first couple of months probably were really just kind of experiments, shooting tests to see, how we could make these looks work.
Stop motion effects on Hellbound were portrayed at their best with the creation and effects of the Chanard Cenobites' hand tentacles, showing just how talented the animators were.
So I had this sort of chat with Tony, and we then talked through essentially the tentacle shots, which was more complex and about which I think he had less of a clear idea as to how they would look, what we might make them look. I think at the time he saw a lot of it being done as live action effects, sort of effects where things on sticks and all the rest of it. And I began to tell him what I thought I could achieve with stop motion. So he asked me to do some storyboards. I did storyboards for him. I took those to his apartment and we talked about over one Sunday. We spent the day together.
Stick my head through it. And then the whole furore of what it's like to be in front of a camera is really exciting for someone who's a makeup artist. It's really exciting. And then the locust wrangler to come in, and he'd show me them and these beautiful things, and then put them on my face while they filmed, and then they all crawled all over my face.
I do remember that there was a Pillar of Souls where a face could be put through it, and it was done, at certain points. I can't remember where it is in Hellbound, but there's a person's face in there made up and all that kind of stuff. So so the idea was that as well at the end of the film, Clive's face would be on the Pillar of Souls, and he'd be saying, "Welcome to my nightmare," to try and extend this this kind of franchise.
That was one of the pieces that me and Clive were like, no, it shouldn't be Julia, it should be the Pillar of Souls.
It was Claire looking quite lovely, actually. She didn't come back as a Cenobite. She came back in a, like I say, nice little black number, hair done nice, bit of makeup, not the slapper you remember.
I never saw this black original, but there you go.
I don't remember a black dress, I don't.
It was shot. There's footage somewhere of Claire in a fabulous black dress rising from not the ashes, but rising from the blood of the victim that allowed her to come back. But it was not to be.
I remember seeing the opticals as rough tests. And it didn't even get to the point when they composited it properly together. They got to a point where it was shot against black velvet and they tried it out. She looked more like a ghost. So I think that was part of the problem. But also I think there was this true meat factor that was missing with that image. And I think it just needed something to guts it up a bit.
I think it was definitely on the cards that Julia was to take over the mantle from Pinhead. It was going to become Julia's franchise. Why that didn't happen, I don't know.
Like many films, Hellbound has missing and deleted scenes. However, unlike most films, Hellbound's missing scenes have become the holy grail of deleted scenes, with fans desperate to know what was deleted and why.
I've been answering for 20, whatever it is, best part of 25 years, the question, what was it that was so terrible about the scene in which Pinhead played a surgeon and the female Cenobite that was so terrible that they couldn't even put it in the unrated version?
Some idiot at the packaging department of the movie's first video release, which was an old school VHS tape, featured a still of this. And of course, it's an exciting image. It's like, oh, here's our demons dressed like doctors. Wouldn't want to be strapped on that operating table.
The story for me is Pete has written one of those little one-line bits in a script that people who read scripts should be very wary of. So Kirsty and Tiffany are running around the hospital, and the doctor and an assistant emerge from a room, and the doctor says, "What are you girls doing here? You know this part of the hospital is out of bounds," or words to that effect. Pete writes into the script that as he talks, he's gowned and masked. As he talks, the mask starts to fill with blood. The mask falls away, nails start to burst through the mask. The mask and the gown fall away, and the same with the female Cenobite, revealing Pinhead and the female Cenobite. Tiffany and Kirsty scream and turn and run. Fine. It's easy to write. How do you film it? How do you mask Pinhead so that it's not obvious that it's Pinhead?
I like to think it worked perfectly well on paper. Not my fault. Or maybe it was a stupid scene to put in the first place.
It's just two doctors turn into Pinhead and the female Cenobite. It's not some huge revelations. It's sort of like, Pinhead goes, ha, 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 we got you. And they go, ah, and they run away. That's really, didn't really move the plot forward that much. So they should rest easy in their beds that they haven't missed anything that tremendous.
My memory is we stood around for a while. I don't even know whether they turned a camera on us before the conclusion was that the scene didn't make sense and was going to be dropped. The set photographer took a photograph of Barbie and I on set.
If they've got the negative, I'm sure they'll put it on some Blu-ray extra sometime somewhere, and then you too will be able to say to everybody, yeah, it was crap.
Released in the USA on the 26th of December 1988 and the 18th of June 1989 in the UK, Hellbound would open to moderate success and mixed reviews, with many comparisons being made to the original film.
It opened up, I believe, on Christmas Day or Christmas Eve in the United States. And I thought to myself, oh, guys, come on. You got to have more faith in mankind than that. You know, hey, honey, get the kids. Let's get in the car. We're going to go see Hellbound. Santa Claus is coming, going. It's okay, kids. It's time to get, scared. You know, like, come on, it's only Christmas. Let's scream a little bit today. I was surprised they released it on Christmas, I must say. That part of it, I was sort of confused.
When I'm joking, I like to call it the Godfather II of horror sequels because, usually the sequels are very poor in real. I wrote a movie called Wishmaster. Have you seen the sequels to that? Fucking hell. But Hellraiser 2, like Godfather 2, pretty good. Consider they were the original, very different.
The fans of it really did take it to heart. I mean, I think it was warmly received by the fans. And they have no idea of the journey that you take, but when it is that hard and it is that pressured, it's a very rewarding to have those same people who you've made that film for respond really well to it, and they did. So that was good. All good stuff.
It was successful. It was deemed a very successful sequel to Hellraiser. But the truth is, we got very mixed reviews. I mean, not just from the arseholes of the mainstream press, where I would expect such a movie to get bad reviews.
It's a B picture full of blood and ugliness. The special effects are clever and stomach churning, the characterization is minimal, and the plotting not much better. There is very little in it to admire, except the effects and the makeup.
I thought that would do as a horror film, Hellraiser 2. If you're going to do a horror film, that's quite a good one to have done.
I just remember my mother ruining it and having to keep going out and screaming, and she nearly passed out several times. But parents are embarrassing, what can I say? That's the first time I saw it. I was very proud, but my family not so.
If there was some clown in the Daily Mail, big surprise, who in his review, I'm not kidding, you can look this up in the archives, called for the jailing of me, Clive and Tony Randel, named us, and said that we should be put in jail for visiting such filth upon the public, which is great. I mean, you can't buy reviews like that. It was fantastic. Because if I'd been a 14-year-old horror fan and read some knob in the Daily Mail saying these guys should be in jail, I'd be in line. It's like, yeah, go see that movie.
Psychiatrists and social workers for years to come will be reaping the whirlwind of a damaged generation from watching films like this. It's such utter bullshit. It's crap. Nobody ever wound up on a psychiatrist's chair and said, I'm here because I saw Hellraiser, or insert name of horror film here, People end up going into therapy for all the usual reasons. Money, sex, religion, work, combinations of these things, grief, death, life. Not horror films. Please do me a favor.
I'm pleased that the fans have embraced Hellbound over the years. I will say, in all honesty, I believe that Hellraiser is the better picture. To me, Hellbound is very flawed, but I'm very critical of my own work. It was my first film. I've directed 11 movies total now.
9 films and counting. Hellraiser seems to live on and on. With its highs and lows, the demand for more films exploring the mythology of Clive Barker's world is still very much in demand by horror fans.
It was clear even while we were making Hellbound that we were not going to be stopping here, that a third film was planned.
I was originally hired to do Hellraiser 3, and I didn't like the way the production was going. I thought they were really cheapening it. I didn't get along with the producers, and I was dispatched rather abruptly one day, and actually was not unhappy about that. I still have story credit on the film, but the execution of the film is not what I would have done.
I was in the crickle and the pine, but not the holly.
they had less money for the third score than they did for the first one. I told them, I said, I don't care whether I get paid for this movie or not. Oh, of course I wanted it. I maybe didn't say that. But I said, what's most important here, guys, is that we have music that at least is comparable to the second one.
I suppose someone out there has been to see Hellraiser 9, though I can't think what kind of appetite he has to have done that. I might go and see Hellraiser 9, actually. I think I might make a point of that, just to see where it went.
I haven't seen any of them. I sort of felt that the first two probably told the story.
The fans, I think, tell you the most in that they see Hellraiser 1 and 2 together, and then they box the other ones after that, which is very flattering for Barbie and Nick and myself. That it makes us feel like we were needed, wanted.
I haven't seen many of them, if I'm honest. I've seen one or two. I like the fact that Chashra has got a life of his own outside. He'd come back in various...
Stop making Hellraiser films unless you're going to make good ones. They're fucking shit.
After nearly 30 years, 9 films, comic books, action figures, potential remakes, what is the legacy of Hellraiser and why is it so popular today with fans around the world?
I get asked, obviously, a lot about what the attraction of Pinhead is and why he kind of immediately took his place alongside the other figures in the main franchises around at the time. I'm probably, not able to see the wood for the trees. I don't really know the answer.
I remember when we first started doing signings for the Hellraiser Chronicles and first started doing conventions. There was definitely this idea of 1 and 2. You're either a 1 person or a 2 person. People either preferred one or the other. Now when you stack them up against the other 7, I think it's those 2 that tend to be people's favourites. It's just because they're good movies.
It's still gaining momentum with the fans and being watched still, and it's stood the test of time. I think because there's so much in it. There's so much detail. Everyone was dedicated to their work. It's just a little bit of magic where everybody got on, enjoyed their work. I think there was a time when there was a lot of serious politics going on, and it was just a joy to be in a workplace where it was complete escapism.
I must stress that at the time, nobody thought, I don't think Clive did, but certainly I don't think anybody else involved in it thought, this is going to be groundbreaking, appeal to people in a particular way.
Really proud of Hellraiser as a legacy. It's sort of stood up really well to sort of test the time.
If it does still hold up today, it's because it's based in a domestic reality, a familial reality. That we can relate to, that will allow us into the story, and then once we're allowed into the story, then we'll go to the extreme imaginative distance with it, that it takes us.
I'm really pleased that I didn't play King John at Stratford, because nobody remembers that production of King John. It's completely disappeared from every memory, and Hellraiser II hasn't disappeared. I mean, it still has an existence.
I wish we could, I wish that we could have carried on making them with the integrity that we made the first 2. But, we're still trying to keep going and making stuff that you will want to see. But, that's what I would say. Thank you for your support. Thank you for passing it on, and I'm pleased that you've enjoyed it.
I can only echo, really, the words that what Boris Karloff always said in relation to Frankenstein. Karloff was in his mid-40s, and he said himself worried about where his career was going, or more importantly, wasn't going, when Frankenstein fell out of the clear blue sky for him. And he talked about my dear old monster and said I owe him everything. And I have to say the same thing, really.
What would be my last words? Would be, that's a wrap.